When moving to Australia, financial decisions can feel daunting. bdhSterling are award-winning experts in expat finances, with dual licensed advisors in the UK and Australia. From pensions to investments, they'll make sure your financial future is smooth sailing. Book your free 1-hour consultation today at bdhsterling.com.
Welcome to the New Life in Australia podcast, hosted by me, Karen Bleakley, founder of smartstepstoaustralia.com. Moving to Australia with my family was a life-changing experience, but it wasn't without its challenges. That's why I'm passionate about making the relocation and resettlement process easier for you, so you can enjoy this exciting adventure. Join me and my special guests as we share professional secrets and tips, learn from people who've made the move, and discover businesses that can help you realise your dreams. Now is the best time to create the life you've always wanted. This podcast is here to show you what's possible and to inspire you every step of the way. Let's go.
Let's take a moment to acknowledge the Gubbi people, the traditional owners and custodians of the land on which I live, work and play. I thank them for the privilege of being able to live in such an incredible part of the world, and I pay my respects to their elders past, present and emerging. Hey there, welcome to the New Life in Australia podcast. I'm your podcast host, Karen Bleakley. This week, I've been having a great conversation with Simon Harvey, who is the Group Managing Director and co-founder of bdhSterling. Now, bdhSterling are chartered financial planners. They've got offices in the UK and Australia, and they're there to help you relocate your finances from the UK to Australia to start your new life over here. We cover lots of different topics today around moving your pension to Australia, whether it's worth it, whether you can do it, what are the benefits and advantages of doing that, and all of the good stuff. We also talk a bit about the UK state pension and whether it's worth topping up national insurance contributions, and just get some great financial tips about moving your wealth across the world to Australia. So let's get started and go straight into the interview. Hey there, welcome to this week's episode of the New Life in Australia podcast. This week I'm here with Simon, who is the Group Managing Director of bdhSterling. Hey Simon, could you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about the role that you do there?
Yeah, hi Karen, and thanks for having me onto the podcast. So I'm one of the founders of bdhSterling. We're a personal financial planning company and provide advice to people in the UK and Australia. And we specialise in helping people that have moved between the two places. I'm a chartered financial planner and I'm a qualified and licensed to advise in the UK and Australia. And I've been advising people that have moved to Australia for the past 20 years. My role nowadays is more around running the business. We've got 50 people in the business. So whilst I still look after a small number of clients, I'm really focused on driving the business forward. I've lived in Australia myself, so I moved over to Australia for a couple of years when we were setting the business up over there. And one of the perks of the job is that I get to travel regularly back and forth between the two countries.
That sounds like a perfect balance. So what inspired you to create the company? Like, how did it come about? Had you been to Australia and you'd spent time here, or where did it all come from?
Yeah, it's a good question. I'd qualified as a financial planner around 20 years ago and was working for a large financial services company. And I thought before I kind of launched into my career as a financial planner, I wanted to go and do some travelling. And I spent a year in Australia, travelling around Australia, and then got back to the UK and was ready to start my career. And an opportunity came up with a small financial planning firm that specialised in advising on pension transfers to Australia. And that really kind of piqued my interest, having this affinity for Australia, having just moved back from there. I thought, yeah, that sounds really interesting actually, and it's a bit different from kind of a normal financial planning role. And I spent 5 years there and really became an expert in how the UK and Australian tax and regulatory systems interact, and learn all about the issues that migrants face. And thought, well, this is great. I adding value for people, helping them move to Australia, giving them some really good advice in terms of how to structure their affairs. But really, it was all quite transactional because build the rapport with people, build that relationship. You'd advise them on the move, but then you had no ongoing relationship beyond that. So for me, I thought it'd be really good if we could have a firm that was licensed in both countries and advise not just on the transfer, but also their ongoing journey once they were down in Australia. So myself and another colleague decided to set up and do exactly that, and have a firm that was licensed in both countries. And we're the only UK chartered financial planning firm that has an office in the UK as well as Australia. And we've now got the 3 offices in Australia. And we support people not just with that initial move, but now providing them with advice throughout their journey.
Yeah, no, that's great. And what kind of services do you offer? Obviously, you're helping people move their financial lives across the world. What does that look like? What kind of services can you provide for people?
Yeah, so at our core, we are a financial planning firm. So we can help people develop a financial plan, determine what's really important to them, what they want to achieve, what their goals are, and then put a plan in place to help them achieve that. So that's maximising their savings and investments, that's optimising their tax planning, that's supporting them with defining what their retirement plan actually is, protecting their family in the event that something happens to them. And if you put all of those building blocks in place, we can really help to reduce financial stress and give people peace of mind and clarity around their future. But initially, the reason why people first engage with us, they don't typically come to us and say, I want a financial plan. It's normally because they've got a particular pain point that they want help with. So it might be that they've settled in Australia now, they've been there for 10 years, and they're now thinking about moving their retirement savings over. And we can help them with that pension transfer piece, which is a very technical area. And there's a load of complex rules around moving your pension fund to Australia. But there are significant benefits to it as well. So it's a exercise that's very much worth exploring, and we can help them with that piece. But then beyond that, we then say, well, now your funds are in Australia. What's your plan for retirement? And then that's where we develop that long-term relationship that I was talking about earlier.
Yeah, and I know that as a migrant myself, you can get really hung up in, we're planning the move to Australia. That is the life plan. We're moving to Australia. And then it's really easy to kind of fall into not having a plan beyond that. And I know that's something that we've been sort of struggling with over the last few years, is realizing that we need bigger plans. Moving to Australia was the first step of that, but there's so much more involved in what we want out of our lives and out of our future. And I know, chatting to people in my Facebook community, a lot of people are realizing that the security that they want in the future is something they need to be starting to think about now. So I know it's something that I tend to put in the too hard basket, and I tend to kind of avoid thinking about. But I think it's really important to be thinking of those bigger goals that are beyond just the move.
Yeah, and that's something that comes up now. Is someone it seems to come up more and more these days. Is people have settled in Australia and they're thinking, right, well, where's the best place to retire? Because they've always got that nagging, or it kind of falls into 2 camps. Some people are just 100% committed to Australia, and others they might move back to the UK. We might move back to the UK, but what does that look like? What does that mean financially? So we often get involved in an exercise where we do a lifetime cash flow forecast or cash flow plan, where we can forecast their financial future if they're going to stay in Australia, and we're going to forecast their financial future if they move back to the UK. So we can paint a picture of both kind of scenarios, and we often find that people can afford to do either, and then it just distills it down to a lifestyle decision rather than a financial decision. But we do get more and more of that these days, where people are thinking about moving back to the UK because of family or other reasons, and they want to know what that might look like. So yeah, you meet people on different stages of their journey.
Yeah, no, that sounds really good to have that picture painted of what the options are, because it just makes that decision-making process so much easier then. For the people who are, like myself, planning on staying in Australia permanently, this is a home. If you've got a pension back in the UK, what are the benefits of moving them to Australia, and how do we know if it's worth doing or not? I know my husband has worked in one company in the UK, but it changed hands many times. So he ended up with lots of different pensions in different companies. And it's just sort of knowing what's worth moving over, what's not, and what are the benefits.
Yeah, sure. So the Australian retirement system kind of works in the reverse of ours. In the UK, we get most of our tax benefits and concessions in the accumulation phase. So we get tax relief on our contributions into the UK pension. The UK pension grows tax-free pre-retirement, and then at retirement age, you're taxed on the benefits as you draw down on them. You get 25% tax-free, but the rest is taxable as income as you draw on it. In Australia, it's all tax-free at retirement, and it grows tax-free in retirement. It's concessionally tax pre-retirement, but the real tax advantages are in that retirement phase. So if you've accumulated a fund in the UK and then transfer it to Australia and decumulate or draw on it there, you actually get the best of both systems. So it works really well if you transfer most type of pension funds down to Australia. In terms of what to transfer and what not to transfer, there are two main types of pension fund in the UK. There's a defined contribution pension, which is the amount of you pay into the pension really determines the amount that you'll get at retirement, and it generally makes sense to move most kind of defined contribution pensions or personal pensions down to Australia because of that kind of tax, the difference between the two tax regimes I mentioned. The other type of pension in the UK is a defined benefit pension, where your pension amount is linked to your salary and length of service with your employer. And it's less clear-cut whether those type of pensions should be transferred, and that's where it's mandatory to have advice from a UK authorised financial planner to move that type of pension. If the value of the fund is over £30,000, you have to take advice from a UK financial planner. And we'll be one of the few financial planning firms in Australia that has pension transfer specialists with the designation to advise on those type of funds within Australia. So that's one of our kind of USPs is being able to provide that advice locally in Australia. And we can advise on whether it makes sense to move that kind of fund. But in addition to the tax breaks, you've also got other things such as eliminating currency risk with your pension. It can be beneficial from an estate planning perspective to have the funds in Australia, and it can also just simplify your affairs. So there's a raft of reasons to look at transferring. Not all pensions should be transferred, and you can only do the transfer from age 55. Prior to 55, you can look at things like, for your husband, Karen, it might be worth looking at a consolidation exercise where you consolidate those into one pot in the UK and then move the funds across to Australia once you're 55 years of age. And we've developed solutions for clients that are living in Australia, such as the ability to hold a UK pension fund, but to invest it in Australian dollars while it's still in the UK. And then we can drip feed the money into Australia from age 55 in line with the contribution caps that apply to pension transfers, because you're capped on the amount you can transfer each year. And if you've got a larger fund, you'll need to drip it in over a number of years.
Okay, well, that's answered lots of the questions that I had on my list now. So we'll jump ahead a little bit further now. So what's a good time for somebody to reach out to you? Is it something that they should be doing before they make the move to get some advice on the way forward, or should they wait till they get in Australia and be here for a few years and then reach out to you? Does it matter?
Yeah, it depends on your circumstances. If you're younger, your main asset is your earning potential because you haven't actually accumulated much in terms of assets in the UK, then it might be relatively straightforward to pitch up in Australia, get your job, and away you go in Australia. But if you've got a more complex situation and you've accumulated assets, it absolutely makes sense to plan pre-move. There are certain benefits that you can only take advantage of if you act prior to moving. And so we typically work with a lot of people that are closer to retirement, that are planning ahead. So they might be going down to Australia on a contributory parent visa to follow their kids, or they might be professionals who have accumulated significant assets and they need to understand how to move them across to Australia in the optimal way. But we also work with a lot of people that have made the move and have been in Australia for 10 years, and now they're serious about staying and have made that decision. They then want to think about moving their retirement savings. So we engage with people at different parts of the journey.
Planning your move to Australia, it's exciting, but let's be honest, it also comes with big financial decisions. That's where bdhSterling comes in. They're the only UK chartered financial planning firm with offices in Australia and the UK, so they understand the complexities of managing your finances across borders. From UK pension options to structuring your wealth and planning for a secure retirement, their team has the expertise to guide you every step of the way, making your move stress-free and your financial future secure. Check out their excellent ratings on Trustpilot and Google and let them help you too. Book your free 1-hour initial consultation today at bdhsterling.com. When you move to Australia, everyone needs to do a tax return here, which I know is a bit of an eye-opener to people that weren't self-employed in the UK. It's sort of a bit different. Even if you work in a job, you're doing a tax return. If you decide not to transfer your pension and you leave your pension in the UK, how does that work in the future? Do you need to do a tax return in the UK, or do you just declare that income on your Australian tax return?
Yeah, so if you are on a permanent visa in Australia, Australia will have the taxing rights on that UK pension under the double tax agreement between the UK and Australia. And that means you're not going to pay tax twice, or if you pay tax in the UK, you'll get a credit for it in Australia, so you're not double taxed. But what you would typically do is apply for relief at source in the UK under the double tax treaty. So there's a specific form that you can complete in Australia that gets sent off to the HMRC, and they'll tell your pension provider not to deduct any tax in the UK, and then you just need to declare it in your return in Australia.
And how does the process of working with you look? Do you try to meet your clients in person, or is it done via video? I know obviously you've got offices in the UK as well as in Australia, so you've got different people based all over the place. Is it video link or is it in person?
Both, really, because what we do is so specialised. We work with people all over the UK and all over Australia. People like to come in, and some people like to come in and do things face to face, which we're very happy to do, and see us at one of our offices. But we also do a lot of work over video as well. So both works for us.
And I know you've got a lot of online seminars and things that run as well, if people just want to kind of come in and find out the basics from you.
Yeah, absolutely. So we run a lot of webinars to help share information and knowledge and some of the things that you should be thinking about. We also have newsletters that we send out on topical subjects for migrants moving to Australia. So if people just want to find out a bit more at this point, they can either check out the webinars. We have a library of those on our website, or they can sign up for our newsletter. And then if they're at the stage where they want to actually speak to us, then we offer initial consultations at no cost, where there's an exploratory meeting where it's a chance to find out a bit more about us to find out a bit more about them, and whether we're a good fit to work together.
That's great. I'll include lots of links in the show notes to all of your details as well for all of those. Can you give us your top financial tips regarding moving to Australia? This is just kind of a general question, really. What things should be people thinking about when it comes to moving your finances to the other side of the world?
It's to understand that what works in the UK doesn't necessarily work in Australia. So the Australia will view things differently. So a UK ISA, for example, if you've got a UK ISA with equities in it and shares in it, Australia will look straight through that ISA wrapper, that tax efficient wrapper, and they'll tax you on the underlying holdings. So you can do things such as change the investments within your ISA and trigger a tax liability in Australia unknowingly. So you need to plan ahead. You need to understand how your assets are going to be treated in Australia. and to have a plan in Australia as well. Know what your budget is, what your earning potential is, what property is going to cost to purchase. If you're going on a temporary visa, you need to know all of the rules around things like stamp duty and Foreign Investment Review Board approval for properties, etc. So it's to have a plan basically. And if you've accumulated assets in the UK, you need to understand how they're going to be treated in Australia, just to avoid any nasty surprises down the track.
Yeah, no, sounds good. Now, this is a question that comes up regularly in my community around the state pension in the UK. And I know that there's a lot of questions around this. Can you still receive the UK state pension when you live in Australia permanently? You can top up your national insurance contributions, I believe, if you've been working up to the date that you moved. Have you got any kind of advice around how the process of all of this works? Because I know it can seem really overwhelming, and I know we've been in touch trying to kind of sort this stuff out over the phone remotely from Australia, and it's a bit of a long-winded kind of experience where things are taking quite a long process to find out what class of national insurance contributions you can make and how the processes of making voluntary contributions from the other side of the world and all of that. So can you kind of give us a bit of an overview of that? I know it's not quite your remit, but it does sort of fit into the puzzle of making the move over here permanently.
Yeah, absolutely. So to be entitled to any state pension, you need to have a minimum number of 10 qualifying years. And those can be years where you're in employment and paying NI, but they can also be years where you were qualified for something called home responsibilities protection. So where you were looking after kids, you get credits for those years where they're under a certain age. So you need a minimum of 10 years to get anything, and you need 35 years to get the full state pension. So that's payable once you reach state pension age. The main difference for people living in Australia is that they won't qualify for the indexation of that pension, so it won't increase each year in line with inflation. Having said that, if you look at the cost of making those voluntary contributions you spoke to, it is still very good value, regardless of the fact that you don't get that indexation. I think that depending on the class of contribution that you pay, it typically takes 4 years to break even on those contributions. And potentially it's within a year, depending on the class of contribution. So I'd still encourage people to make those voluntary contributions. And the first step would really be to get a state pension forecast, find out where you currently are in terms of number of years of credits, and then work backwards from retirement to make those contributions. Because if you've only got 10 years of contributions to make and you're 20 years away from retirement, you probably don't need to think about making those voluntary contributions for a little while yet. Because you could do so in the last 10 years of prior to state pension age, but absolutely look to maximise those contributions where you can.
Yeah, no, that's really helpful. Thank you. And as I say, it's something that we've started looking into in the last year or so, and I know that the processes can take quite a while, so I'll see what links I can put together for the show notes as well if you want to explore that a little bit more. But thank you so much. That's been really helpful. I've got one last question for you, which tends to be the hardest one to answer, which is if you had one piece of advice for somebody who was making the move to Australia, what would that one piece of advice be?
I would say plan ahead where possible, 12 to 18 months in advance, ideally. There can be significant opportunities in the UK that can be taken advantage of prior to departing, and those can make a big difference to your financial future, potentially leading to an earlier than expected retirement, for example. So understanding the issues that you face is really important. Not only does it avoid you having any nasty surprises and tripping up unnecessarily, but as I say, there is potential to unlock significant opportunities as well.
That's great. And where can people go if they want to find out more about you and your services?
Sure. The best thing to do is go to our website, bdhSterling.com, and send us an inquiry to set up an initial conversation.
That's fantastic. Thanks so much for your time today, Simon.
It's a pleasure. Thanks, Karen.
So thanks so much to Simon for his time today. It was really valuable chat and I learned a lot during the process. I'm sure you did too. If you enjoyed the episode, I would love it if you would please leave a review because it really does help more people discover the podcast. And in the meantime, let's get building your new life in Australia one episode at a time.